With any luck, this will be a wide enough window. This is an unusually shaped survey. This is from the Center for Information and Study on Clinical Research Participation, Survey of Pharmacists. As a member of the American Society of Health System Pharmacists, I receive a number of digests, is what they're called. But there's like an email listserv for pharmacists, and I'm a member of a couple of those. And I receive them, and I check them out every morning to see if there's anything, interesting. And one of them today asked for survey. And the pharmacist who sent it, she's a member of the Center for Information and Study on Clinical Research Participation, which is industry pharmacists. Well, probably more than just industry pharmacists, but it's basically drug companies. They are very interested in clinical research participation because they're the ones who are having the drugs with clinical studies and need people to do clinical research participation. Very difficult to test a drug without people willing to take the drug. So what they're doing here is they're conducting a study to explore pharmacists' interest in educating patients about clinical research studies. We'd like to know what you think about this potential role for you and your colleagues. Please share your feedback with us by completing this 2-page survey. Should only take about 10 minutes. 10 minutes if you're not talking like I do. And answers will be kept strictly confidential. They will only be used in the aggregate and never in any way that can be linked to you. Pharmacists from across the country volunteered their time to assist CIS-CRP in I don't know how they would say that. CISCRP? I don't know. Developing and reviewing the survey options. The funding was provided by Eli Lilly, which is a drug company, which doesn't matter. This is just to quickly do a tangent. Like today at my rotation, there was a drug rep from, I'm not going to name the company, but I know him actually. He came in and he was talking about a brand new drug that they have, that their company's putting out, and he spoke with the staff pharmacy, and then later on, his company was hosting a webinar about a completely different topic. And so we went up and watched the webinar as well. And I didn't go to his presentation in the morning, actually. His presentation was ending right as one of the pharmacy residents was going to do a case presentation, and we were showing up for the case presentation. But there's a little bit of an ethical issue when it comes to that kind of stuff. Because they've been having drug reps go and talk to doctors for years, and it kind of influences prescribing habits. It actually influences prescribing habits. They've done studies, and they found that while physicians don't think they're being influenced, their before and after prescribing habits show that they have been influenced to some degree. Now, the difference is with pharmacists, for the most part, pharmacists don't have prescribing authority. So you can convince the pharmacist that your drug is the greatest one on the world, but the pharmacist can only recommend it to the physician, and then the physician has to actually agree. So there's a little bit more of it's less of an ethical issue. With doctors, they can just write for it immediately, so there's more of an ethical issue there. Anyway, I just wanted to say that real quick because this survey is actually dealing with the issues that these drug companies are themselves facing. So there's absolutely no problem with them funding this survey. They're trying to find out, are pharmacists willing, not only willing, willing, are they willing to enter into this kind of role? So the first page, I looked at the first page to see what it's asking. So what is your current primary practice setting? I technically work for a chain pharmacy. I go to a school of pharmacy, and at the moment I am in an inpatient pharmacy. So there's a lot of different choices here. I'm going to say that I'm at a chain pharmacy, though, because that's technically my employer. Okay, what state is my primary practice? Normally, it says if you do not have a primary practice site, which I kind of technically don't, put the state in which you reside. That's Arizona. All right, for your primary practice site, which best describes my current position? The closest is kind of a resident-ish. I'm more than a technician, but less than a pharmacist. So I put myself down as a resident fellow, because a pharmacy resident is a fully licensed, autonomous, independently acting pharmacist. Any pharmacy resident, well, maybe not immediately. It takes a month or two to get your license, but residents are pharmacists. They have their PharmD, they are registered pharmacists, they have their own license, and they can practice under their own authority. Interns can't. So I'm kind of in between. I'm like in between technician and resident technically, but I'm closer to a resident than I am to a technician. Do I currently provide direct care or counsel pharmacy patients or customers? Yes. Yes, I do. Next. On a typical day, how many pharmacy patients or do you provide direct counsel to? I only work for 2 hours on a typical day, and even then, I probably talk to at least 3 to 5 people. So I can say the actual 1 to 10, or I can extrapolate that over an 8-hour day, I would probably talk to up to, 20 or 30 people, somewhere in here. And in Arizona, we have mandatory counseling on new prescriptions. So I could have an even higher number. So I'm going to put 20 and 30. I'm going to, between what I actually do right now and what I anticipate I would do on a typical day in real life. Which best describes your relationship with your patients? Let's see. I make sure all of my patients, customers, I never say customers. I have patients. Health questions are answered. Not only do I answer health questions, and this is only in Arizona, I can do some of it here in Pennsylvania with my pharmacist there. In Arizona, I have a slightly more, I don't want to say authority. I'm less constrained by the law in Arizona, but I answer a lot of questions, especially like over-the-counter items. My pharmacist loves me to take care of. Loves for me to take care of over-the-counter questions. Because it's good practice. It's not that they don't like it. In fact, I refer all kinds of them to my pharmacist. Anybody, if you come in and you're 4 years old or younger, or you're asking about a 4-year-old or younger, I won't answer the question. I will listen. I will take a history. I will find out what's going on and what you're looking for. I will figure out what I would recommend, and then I send you to the pharmacist and then see what they recommend. Mostly because there's a lot of stuff over the counter that's not indicated for children 4 or younger than 4, and so I don't want to take any. I'm going to say quote unquote risks in recommending something. Plus, my pharmacist has kids, so she knows, from firsthand experience what to give and how to give and stuff like that. All right, which of the following do you feel limits your time with patients or customers? Work volume limits my time. My manager or supervisor does not. Actually, the pharmacy I work at, one of their new initiatives and one of the things they're investigating is actually having the pharmacist not in the pharmacy. They want to put the pharmacist out in front of the pharmacy. Because what happens is, and this is actually the role that I play right now in my pharmacy, the pharmacist is at the computer, checking orders, checking the prescriptions after they've been filled, counseling patients, doing all of that. And the thing is, they can only see kind of the waiting area from where they are. So if there's somebody in the waiting area, they can see them and go and help them, what have you. But all of the over-the-counter medications and all of the diabetic testing equipment and all of the vitamins and minerals, and those are all behind a wall from where the pharmacist is. You can't see them. And so when you have patients walking around looking at the shelves trying to figure out what to do, you don't see them, and you don't have it. You don't. If you saw them, you would go help them, but you don't see them. And a lot of people are afraid or hesitant to go ask the pharmacist. A lot of people think that they're bothering the pharmacist, which technically, yeah, you're bothering the pharmacist. But on the other hand, that's what the pharmacist is there for. And most of the pharmacists that I work with like to answer these questions. They want to help you. And then some people won't go ask the pharmacist for whatever other reason. I've met a couple people, and they won't let you answer their questions. They won't ask the question. You can tell they have questions because they've been standing there staring at the items on the wall for 5 minutes and don't know what to do, but they won't ask you a question. I don't know if it's because, I don't even know why. If they're shy or they're embarrassed or they're too proud or they don't know what to ask or they'll feel stupid or whatever it is. So there's all kinds of stuff. But my store, I think even my whole chain is trying to move the pharmacist closer to patients to get that kind of relationship where you feel absolutely comfortable asking the pharmacist things, and also so that the pharmacist can see you when you need help, where otherwise they wouldn't be able to. Expectations of colleagues, what limits your time with patients? I don't think I'm not actually sure how that works. Now, of course, this isn't written for a chain pharmacist. This is written for all pharmacists. So there's different things that do that. Maybe you have a particular workload and your colleagues are expecting you to take care of that workload and you're not because you're spending too much time counseling. But my work volume is definitely the biggest thing, especially with the current workflow. Having to check all the prescriptions that come in, having to check all the prescriptions that come out, all very important things, but also a little bit time consuming, and you're kind of chained to that computer. And if you are counseling, or if you do walk out and help someone pick an over-the-counter item, the correct one for them. And it's not just a simple thing usually all the time. Sometimes you need to actually get down and find out what's going on with the patient, what other medications they're on, what health conditions they might have, which of these products is right for you. Because the goal of a pharmacist is not to provide adequate care. Our goal is to provide optimal care. We want the best choice for you. And so it can be a little bit time consuming. So, and what happens is when you're out there doing that, nothing can go on in the pharmacy. I can type a prescription in, but nobody's checking it, so it doesn't get filled. I can fill a prescription, but nobody's checking it, so I can't sell it to you. And all these things get backed up. Which of the following topics do you currently provide information? Use and side effects, yes. Not so much. Alternative treatments. Like, I could recommend, one type of over-the-counter treatment as opposed to another, like a decongestant versus an antihistamine, but not really. Over-the-counter. Out-of-pocket costs, I do that a lot. Insurance coverage, I have done. The biggest one for insurance coverage is coming up in November, December. Medicare comes out, and it's a labyrinthine process. Trying to find out which... We have our computer system, we can type all of your drugs in, or actually if you get your prescriptions filled at us, we can just pull up your profile and immediately it cross-references all the drugs you take versus the Medicare plans that are available to you and finds which one provides you the lowest cost co-payments or the lowest premiums. And it doesn't just spit out one plan, it spits out all the plans so that you can take it and look at it and compare which is better for you and which is not. And that's a huge help because they've done studies and they found that there are people who are eligible for Medicare, but they don't know how to sign up, or they don't know when to sign up, or they don't know what plan to sign up on, and so they don't actually get onto the benefits. Do we provide referrals? No. Clinical trials? I don't provide information on clinical trials. We have a clinical trial patient, one here in Pennsylvania, and I had another one in Arizona. But for the most part, we didn't provide them any information because they were in a trial, and so they got the information that they got. How often do patients ask you about clinical trials? Almost never. Never had a patient come in and ask me about a clinical trial. Okay, this one you kind of lose out on a little bit here. It says, using the scale below, please indicate how strongly you agree or disagree with the statements. People who participate in clinical research studies... And then you see strongly, somewhat disagree, and then there's a strongly disagree over to the side that you can't see. Okay, so people who participate in clinical trials are making a contribution to public health. I agree that they are. Are like guinea pigs. I somewhat disagree with the fact that they're like guinea pigs. The issue here is there can be a bias against some people. I don't even want to say it's against the patients who are in the trial, but more against the hosts, the sponsors of the trial, the people who are actually putting on the trial. Because to a degree, you have to have a medical question that you're uncertain about the answer, and you then do a trial to find out the answer. And so to that degree, you are kind of using these patients as a guinea pig. But there are all of these safeguards in place through the institutional review boards. And the Institutional Review Board, actually my pharmacist, my preceptor is on that at the hospital that I'm on my rotation at. And what happens is if you want to do a trial, you have to put down everything that you want to do and present it to the Institutional Review Board, and they look through it and say, yes, this is ethical, this is a legitimate question, your procedures that you have outlined are appropriate and they safeguard the patient properly. The Institutional Review Board, their job is the patient. They protect the patient from poorly designed, or, I mean, it doesn't even have to be like poorly designed deliberately. If you didn't think of something and your study would have had the potential to cause harm because of that, their job, this group of people, is to review your study and find that stuff out, and so you can fix it and all that. But I don't think that they're guinea pigs. Okay, do clinical research study patients get the best possible treatment? Oh, I want something in the middle here. I don't think that you necessarily get better treatment just because you're in a clinical trial. In fact, I think because of the uncertainty, you probably can't even call it the best treatment. Like, logically, it cannot necessarily be the best treatment. Because you wouldn't know. I'm going to somewhat disagree, especially because so many clinical trials, so many drugs that are coming out recently are called Me Too drugs. And what they're basically just another version of a drug that already exists. There's a class of drug, for example, called angiotensin II receptor blockers. And they're an old drug class. They've been around for a number of years now. But like just a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, they released the 8th different ARB. ARB is angiotensin II receptor blocker. Are you necessarily getting better care because you're taking that ARB than if you're taking any of the other 7 ARBs? No. It probably works just as well. And there's really no difference between them. There's a lot of drugs where that's kind of the case. There's not really, on a population level, any difference between certain drugs. And you just have to, when you get certain patients, you get different responses for any number of factors. So I don't think you're necessarily getting the best treatment just because you're in a clinical trial. All right, you're taking a gamble with their health. I somewhat agree. You are kind of taking a gamble with your health. Before a drug goes into a clinical trial, there's 4 phases of clinical trials that are required by the FDA to get a drug approved. You have there's phase 1 trials, which determine safety. Usually these are animal trials, and they determine if we give you this, this chemical, which we later call a drug, is it safe for you to take? The second phase is where they do safety again, but this time with more subjects, and this time humans. And they also usually try to find like doses. They'll find a dosing range. Phase 3 trials, which are the big ones, like whenever you hear, in the news about a trial with a drug, it's a lot of times a phase 3. And this is a trial where they're testing efficacy. So they get people who actually have the disease they're trying to treat, and they go into the clinical trial, and then they get this drug or a placebo, or they'll get this drug or an existing drug that we know treats it. And then we see, if it's efficacious. Does it work at all? Does it work better than the existing drug? Does it work worse than the existing drug? Things like that. So and then the other thing is, even though you've gotten the safety studies in phase 1 and 2 with animals and then some humans, you don't have as many people, because phase 3 trials are even bigger than phase 2. So now you have more people taking the drug, and these are sick people taking the drug. Phase 2 is usually given to healthy people, because you don't want to you don't want to test whether or not a drug is safe by giving it to an already sick person. So these phase 3 people are sick. They're getting treated. This time they're receiving the drug, for longer. They're actually sick. And there have been a number of studies that they end the study early. Everything looked good, but then when you suddenly start treating 1,000 patients, you notice that, the drug causes more X side effect, like heart attacks. We'll just say heart attacks. So this drug causes heart attacks. It's like, oh my gosh, when we tested it before, it didn't cause heart attacks, but now that we're giving so many people it, now they're having heart attacks. So they stop the trial immediately, and you don't get that drug anymore, and that drug doesn't come onto the market. So there's a slight gamble. That's why I only somewhat agree. Most of the time, people aren't going into clinical trials with drugs that they give it to you and you die. like immediately. That kind of stuff gets weeded out well before they start giving you it to treat. Okay, so people who participate in clinical research studies learn more about their condition and health in general. I'm right here in between strongly and somewhat agree, and I'm going to say it depends on the trial, really. There's so much. You need informed consent to participate in a trial. You can't just be enrolled in a clinical trial. They are required, I believe, by law, and I'm pretty sure it's by law. If not by law, then they're required by every single organization that has to approve it to receive what's called informed consent. They have to educate you about this is your disease state. This is what's going to happen if you receive no treatment. This is the potential if you do receive treatment, and this is and they have to tell you, all the stuff. So they know from their safety studies that these are the kinds of side effects maybe that are caused by the drug. So they have to say that. And they might know from phase 2 might have some efficacy data available too, so they can mention that. But basically they have to, and then they have to go over your alternatives. They can say, instead of enrolling in the trial and receiving this drug that we're testing, you can go on to, this drug, get this type of surgery, use this kind of, device, and that's how, you would normally treat this condition. And then having known all that, the person has to say, yes, I would still like to participate in the trial. So I do think they have to have at least a little bit more. They have to learn something more about their condition and health. And I think that if you're in a trial you have active participation, like especially with a clinical trial where you're dealing with chronic disease states. If you're in a clinical trial for a diabetes medication, I'm pretty sure you're going to learn a lot about your diabetes, even if you didn't know too much to begin with. Just in doing this trial, you're going to have to learn about it. So I'm gonna put strongly agree, but I'm in the middle right here. And those who participate in clinical research studies are making a contribution to science. I agree. At some point, we need people to do these clinical trials. You have to have patients do it. Otherwise, we are not going to be able to get together the information to determine how these medications work. And so, I do think there's a major contribution to science. And man, I wish I had made this recording area a little bit larger, because now on this page, I'm cutting off questions. How important do you think it is to educate pharmacy patients or customers about clinical research participation before they enroll? How important do you think it is to educate patients about clinical research participation before they enroll in a clinical trial? Very important. Just like I said with informed consent, even then, it's important that they have that information. How interested do you think that patients, customers would be in receiving information about participating in a clinical research from their pharmacist? I'm not reading properly. I should mention right now I have a very, very bad headache. And I'll also mention that I had heard this from a pharmacist, not in real life actually, but on the telly. And she had mentioned if you suffer from recurrent headaches, you might try drinking more water. So I'm drinking some water. Tasty. All right. So how interested do you think that they are? I would say somewhat. There are still a lot of people who do not really think of a pharmacist as a medical professional, kind of. For example, I get this a lot. A patient's getting put on a new medication they've never taken before, and the doctor will tell them something about it in the office. Then when they come to pick up their medication at the window, and I say, would you like the pharmacist to go over that with you? They say, nope, the doctor's already done it. And that's not exactly what I was going to say, but so once a person has talked to the doctor, they don't think there's a need to talk to the pharmacist. Not always true. The second thing that I get sometimes is that people don't think, and this I don't get too much in my stores because these are not the people coming to talk to me, but there are some people who don't even think of the pharmacist when they're trying to think of a health professional. They've done like surveys and stuff on this where it's like name a medical professional, and you're going to get doctor and nurse. Those are the two you're going to see all the time. Pharmacist is lower on the list. People will start naming types of doctors before they start naming the pharmacist. So I think there's some of that there. And then, of course, the older population, pharmacy up through, the 90s even, has been a very different model of healthcare from like doctors and nurses. The pharmacist was viewed more of a businessman. You would go to the pharmacy and he would know things, and so you could talk to him about minor over-the-counter stuff, or even if you had a better relation with your pharmacist. I've had people come in and talk about like their cancer regimens and stuff with the pharmacist, which certain people do that. But on average, the pharmacist is a guy that's there to sell you drugs, and then that's kind of the end. And pharmacy is right now making a big move away from that. It's not that it's wrong, but it's changed. Pharmacists are better educated than they've ever been before. Now they have clinical pharmacy practices. There's an expansion through collaborative practice arrangements where pharmacists now they have more clinical knowledge due to the education, which has increased, and they want to put it to use. And you don't put too much clinical pharmacy knowledge to use reviewing orders and filling prescriptions. So there's a movement away from that practice model, just as what's the word I want to use for it? It's not as fulfilling, I guess. I'm not sure what word I want for that. But that idea still exists in people where they don't think of it. So I think if you gave a patient an option, we're going to put you on this drug in this clinical trial, would you like the doctor or the pharmacist to talk to you about it? Most people are going to ask for the doctor. Probably a lot of people are going to ask for the doctor, even if they're testing a drug. Even if they're testing an existing drug that's been around for years for a new indication. If they're going to use a drug in a different way than it's been used before to see if it helps, I think most people would still want to talk to the doctor. If you knew that patients were interested in receiving information about clinical trials from their pharmacist, how willing would you be to provide this? Very willing. I would love to. Which of the following topics do you feel adequately prepared to discuss with a patient? Risks, benefits, rights, no. Well, and that's not, I don't feel adequately prepared as an abstract. I think if you gave me a particular trial and a particular patient, I might then be able to tell you whether or not, so I'm not going to click it now. How to learn more? No. Some of these things I just don't know, so I wouldn't feel. How they work, I can tell you that. Why they're needed? Yes. Informed consent? Yes. Phases? Yes. I've already done that this video. The rationale and implications? Yes, I can talk about that. All right. Those are what I think I would be able to talk about. How clinical trials work? Kind of. I'm half and half on that. I'll say yes. Okay, so this goes from very comfortable, somewhat uncomfortable, very uncomfortable, and not possible in my setting. Those are the options that are off the screen. Using the scale below, please indicate how comfortable you would be. Providing an automatically generated list of clinical trials that might be appropriate for a patient customer based on their medication history. Uncomfortable. I don't think I should be able to just print off a list of here's the trials that you might be able to participate in. I'm not actually sure who would be appropriate to do that for a patient offhand. Wearing a button reading Ask Me About Clinical Trials. Somewhat uncomfortable. Unless I was actually part of a clinical trial, like one of the pharmacists, helping to run the clinical trial, in which case I would be very comfortable. But as a general ask me about clinical trials if you're, curious. No, I wouldn't wear a button like that. Maybe ironically. Initiating a conversation about participating in a clinical trial. Again, if I was running the trial, I would be comfortable with that. If I was, so I'm saying, based on your medication history, I think, you would be, what's the word? You would be a fit for the trial. You would, brain work. You would be inclusion and exclusion. Basically, you would be okay to enter this trial. I wish my brain was working. But to just initiate, about trials that I might know about, no. I'm going to put somewhat. Providing patients a general education brochure on clinical research along with their prescription. If they were in a trial, yes, but no. Making information about clinical trials available in an information kiosk. To just have my clinical trial kiosk. Showing a video about clinical research participation in your practice setting. I'd be comfortable with that. Knowing the pharmacy provides an opt-in service through which patients are automatically sent information about clinical trials based on their medication history. So, I would be uncomfortable with that. It's it's weird. I know what they're getting at here, and I understand why. They need somehow a patient has to be able to find out about clinical trials. And in certain disease states, patients want to be in clinical trials. Like, there's a lot of patients who, if you have cancer, or back 10 years ago or 20 years ago, if you had HIV, you wanted to be in a clinical trial because there was nothing. And so you wanted to be there at the forefront receiving these drugs. And some people, I've read about a couple studies, and actually there was a bill. Some patient's family was trying to get it passed because they couldn't get into a clinical trial they couldn't get into a clinical trial because they didn't meet the inclusion criteria, but they still wanted to get the drug, and the FDA, I guess, wouldn't allow it because it was an untested, technically, drug. It wasn't approved. There was no way to know if it was safe or not to give them. But at some point, people need to know how to get into a clinical trial. So what they're looking at here is, will I wear a button? Will I automatically give out, will I give out a generated list of trials just to patients at random? Will I talk to patients about a clinical trial? I'm going to be more comfortable with that just because now I see what they're doing. If I would provide customers general education brochure along with their prescription, just to let patients know, this is what clinical research is. And then they can then take on the initiative to go look and see if they want to participate in it. Making a kiosk, so just to have a little information section. So when people are at the pharmacy and they're waiting for the prescription to get filled, and again, I'm doing this from a chain pharmacy standpoint, even though that's not the only standpoint this is asking about. If I had like a little clinical trial table, here is it. Would I show a video about clinical research? Would I be comfortable knowing that we have an opt-in service through which they're automatically sent information about clinical trials based on the medication? Now, this is opt-in. Yes, I would be very comfortable with that. This is one, I'm in between comfortable, but this is where the patient wants to participate in clinical trials, and so we flip a switch in the computer, and now, based on their medication history, trials they are, the word, I don't know. Trials they comply with, trials they're acceptable for, trials that they're a fit for. Those ones pop out, and so that way they can do the research themselves. I like that better. Conducting seminars to learn about. Yes, I have no problem conducting seminars. I like it. Okay, so his has best method, second best method, and third best method. Given the realities of your workday, which of the following would be the most effective means of providing information about clinical trials to patients or customers? Please rank the top 3. Okay, the most effective means of providing information. Automatically generated list, having a conversation, providing a general education brochure. These are basically the exact same stuff. Okay, the best method of providing information about clinical trials, the best method as far as I'm concerned, is having a conversation with a patient. The second best method, conducting occasional seminars. I think seminars would be either the second or third best method. I'm very big on actually talking to people. While I personally, if I walked in, I would want a brochure. I don't want to talk to the pharmacist yet. Why? Because I, as a person, you might get this from watching me, I like being very correct about things. So to walk in and start talking about in a conversation about this without knowing anything about it, I would lack perspective on the issue. And I wouldn't know what questions to ask. I don't know what's relevant. That's why I would prefer to do my own little research first, then go talk to someone with any questions that I might have. So I think a kiosk second best method and third best method I'm going to say is a occasional seminar. You basically covered what I would have thought. If you knew that many patients wanted to receive information about clinical research from their pharmacist, how interested would you be in receiving continuing education to better be able to counsel them? I would be, if many patients, I'd be very interested. I always want to be.
If a lot of my patients wanted to participate in clinical research, I would best serve them by keeping up to date on clinical research information so that I could help them as their pharmacist.
Their pharmacist. That was kind of stupid. I hate filling out these little things because I always sound like an idiot when I do it. If you knew that many patients, customers wanted to receive information about clinical research from a pharmacist, how many hours per month would you be able to spend on the following? Learning more about clinical research in order to better help them. In a month, I could probably spend 1 to 4 hours per month easily doing that. Keeping up with current and upcoming trial opportunities in your area to share them. Probably 1 to 4 hours per month. I mean, if I did it an hour a week, spread over a couple days, 20 minutes a day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, that wouldn't be that hard. In your current work environment, how much time would there be to spend discussing clinical trials with an interested patient? I could probably talk for 5 to 10 minutes with any given patient while I'm on duty working in the pharmacy. If I knew a patient had these questions, I would probably just, once I pass off, normally during a workday, you have a pharmacist in the morning and a pharmacist in the afternoon, depending on the store, actually. My store happened to have a pharmacist in the morning and a pharmacist in the afternoon and evening. So when if I was the morning pharmacist and I got off work at 4 o'clock, I wouldn't mind going, taking the patient into the immunization room, which is a private room, and talking for half an hour after work. I wouldn't mind that personally. But in the middle of the day, I mean, even spending 5 to 10 minutes is a long time in the pharmacy. I'm going to put it down to 2 to 4. In your practice setting, what would be the biggest challenge to implementing a program for pharmacists and pharmacy technicians to provide information about clinical trials to patients and customers? Spelling, corporate sign-off. The biggest challenge would be having, the parent company, the corporation, the chain pharmacy I work for, say, say, that's fine, you can do that. What is your sex? All the time. No, stupid. In what year were you born? People are going to find out when I was born. Oh no. I have additional pharmacy training certificates. I have BCL. And pharmacist provided immunization certification. I'm going to say PharmD. I technically am not right now, but that's what I will be, so. On which of the following clinical research topics have you received education or training? I have the drug development process, clinical research methodology, analysis and interpretation, ethics, counseling. About clinical research, I have not that particularly. I had two different classes on all of these, so I know a little bit about that. In which of the following ways have you been directly involved with the clinical trial? I have dispensed the study drug. Yep, I have done that. I have dispensed the study drug. Please share any additional thoughts on the pharmacist providing information about patients' customers. If patients are willing to accept the pharmacist as an authority when it comes to information regarding clinical research, then I, as a pharmacist, am more than willing to provide any information I can to my patients. Next. And there we go. Done. Until next time. Bye-bye.